Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 79. I am your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we are excited to have with us the internationally acclaimed and award-winning comic book writer, Erica Schultz. Erica.
Wow, what an intro.
Look at that, see?
Oh my God.
I got a word before we went on the air. I was telling you that I've been, following your Kickstarter.
Stalking
and listening to all these other podcasts that you've been on. So
stalking. Yeah.
I'm gonna make sure that I'm not gonna ask all this, all the same questions. So I'm gonna keep things lively as well. So because you're here to talk to us about your latest Kickstarter, Deadliest Bouquet, which is you got days left, and I think the last check you're at.
I'm not.
Really
I am not endlessly refreshing.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
I am not endlessly refreshing for good or for ill.
Yeah.
Because I do have a lot of work that I have to do. So I keep thinking like, oh, just go do your work, and then this way, and then I have weekly, sometimes more than one time a week, calls with my editor James Emmett. And James has been endlessly refreshing. so I don't want there to be like a competition of like, who refreshes next? At this point, it's like, look, let's be frank. I'm asking strangers on the internet for money.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just a matter of like, look, I have credits. You either like my stuff or you don't like my stuff. You either want to take a chance or you don't take a chance. I'm hoping that you take a chance. But
right.
yeah.
And you have, and like I said, so yeah, Deadly Bouquet. I mean, it's
Bouquet is actually technically a romance novel that was written, I think, in 2012. This is the Deadliest Bouquet.
That's right.
I don't want any trademark issues. I don't want some, septuagenarian coming after me for royalties or anything like that. It's the Deadliest Bouquet.
And you'd figure after listening to all your podcast, I would have gotten that straight away. So
right.
Yeah.
I still don't know if it's bouquet or bouquet, depending on whoever is saying it. So I'm just like, whatever.
Right. And
it's
so
a book about three sisters with flower names who kick serious ass and try to solve their mom's murder.
Right. And so yeah, you have this was a story that you've kind of had in the hopper, you've been thinking about for a while. And it was going to go to a publisher, but then COVID happened, and then they were like, I'm not quite sure if we're going to be able to do this or not. And then
why am I even here? You already know the story.
I already know the story. So, and your friend James, your editor, said, hey, I've done Kickstarters before, so let's do it. Let's do it on a Kickstarter. But this isn't your first Kickstarter, right?
No, the first Kickstarter that I did was for a book called Strange Tales with Claire Connolly. It was an anthology of 3 stories. 2 of the stories we had previously done, and a third story was a new story. So we were kickstarting for a fund to pay the colorists, because the 2 previous stories were black and white, to colorize them and to also print it all together. And it actually was nominated for a Ringo Award last year for Best Anthology.
Right. And also too, it says you have 3 backing, but one of them was you accidentally hit the Deadliest Bouquet button.
Yes, I was a little over anxious.
Yeah. And
I hit the button to launch. I thought it was the pre-launch, and it launched, and then I frantically texted James and then frantically called him, and it turned into this whole big thing. And then I had to text all my friends who had immediately backed it to, cancel your pledge. Ah! And it turned into this whole nightmare. And then I beat myself up for a couple of days about how idiotic I was. And then as I'm beating myself up, I've getting emails and texts of support of, oh yeah, I totally screwed that up when I did my first Kickstarter. So apparently it is actually a common thing. And then I beat myself up for not being unique.
Right.
So there you go. So it's all just,
right.
Consistent self-deprecation. What can you do?
And is that part, is that covered in, Gregory Pock's book about, accidentally hitting the The go launch button?
It probably is. I read it very, very thoroughly for Strange Tales.
Yeah.
I skimmed it for this. I probably should have read it thoroughly again. I did not, and that is my own bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I will stand by Greg's book. And I've said it before, it will either empower you or it will scare the hell out of you. And if
Right.
it scares the hell out of you, that's good though, because it means you're not ready. And if you're not ready, you're not going to have the stamina to do 4,000 podcasts and answer the same questions over and over and over. A friend of mine was very funny the other day. He said, yeah, I watched you on one of these podcasts and it was amazing seeing you smile. And I was like, of course I'm smiling because I'm asking strangers for money.
Right.
If I was really doing this, I would just be like,
go on, you like
no
it,
makeup,
yeah.
Don't blow out my hair. But let's be honest, I'm a woman, so I have to wear makeup. I have to have my hair all nicely done and smoothed out. I can't have any of my weird kinky curls or anything like that. Like, we've got to abide by society's norms.
Well, and so talk to us a bit about like the Deadliest Bouquet. You have a great log line for it, and I'm sure you have it memorized by now.
I do. In 1998, 3 estranged sisters, trained by their Nazi hunting mother, reunite to solve their mother's murder and try not to kill each other in the process.
And so talk to so it's what do you have? Yeah, it's 3. It's Rose, Poppy, and Violet.
Yes,
3 sisters, and you have and you mentioned in a previous interview as well as that all 3 of them kind of have their own separate lives. They all kind of do this, and now they have to kind of come together, and they're basically kind of reverting back into how their sibling hierarchy happens.
Yeah, every family has a hierarchy. I mean, that's just that's a natural thing where you have society, you have a hierarchy, you have a family, you have a hierarchy. And when you are of multiple siblings, there will be a hierarchy. It's usually the oldest at top, and then going down from there. And Violet, who's the youngest, has been off doing her own thing for a couple of years now. She doesn't want to have to come back and listen to her older sisters tell her that she's wrong or, tell her what to do. Rose, despite staying with mom, she's got her own life. She's got everything that she needs to worry about. She knows what she needs to do. The last thing she needs to do is worry about Violet being a loose cannon and doing something, or Poppy freaking out about something and being dramatic. And Poppy left, had her own life. She has her husband, she has kids. The last thing she wants to think about is, great, if I bring my family into, if I bring my nuclear family into my siblings, then my husband is going to really learn how dysfunctional my family life was. He knows that there's some dysfunction, but he has no idea the lengths to which it has gone, where it comes down to being trained for murder and espionage and all these other things, as opposed to just, oh yeah, I had a single mom and she was a little weird.
Right. Yeah.
And
so you decided to have it take place in 1998 for for one issue that you mentioned earlier, is because it's so easy for people to get on a phone and kind of find answers right away. So the fact that 1998 you had the block phones, you couldn't text.
You didn't have internet on the phones. You couldn't text on the phones. You couldn't get any of that stuff. And even the amount of people that had the brick phones. Yeah. There were so few people that had the brick phones. It was either something for the ultra rich, or it was something for people who, we'll have like one phone for each, will be on a family plan, and it's just because, God forbid, you get into an accident taking the kids to school, that kind of thing. Right. But the majority of the people that had them, like, first of all, there wasn't a majority of people that had them. There were very, very few. And secondly, it needed to, in terms of the time, just, looking at linear time, it needed to be able to fit plausibly with when World War II started and ended.
Right. And
So,
right. And so I guess my question for you about that, because before we went on the air, it looks like it's like a year between us or so, and it's like, so was there, besides the technology aspect of it, how much of it was based off of like a nostalgia of late 90s that you personally wanted to kind of revisit?
well, I wanted it to be a time that I knew I was comfortable with, the time that
Right.
I could remember comfortably. But also, there is it's so subtle that nobody notices it until I actually bring it up. 1998 was sort of a transition year for a lot of things, not just fashion and music and things like that, but it was the penultimate year before everybody really went crazy about Y2K. And there was a sort of strange kind of eeriness that sort of permeated everything.
Right.
When I say we, I mean just collectively, knew that there was something that there was to be scared of, but we had absolutely no idea what. And I don't think the vast majority of people really understood why. I don't think they understood, like an odometer, when the numbers turned, that the world was going to blow up, kind of thing. And we were all sort of looking to Australia to see, Australia wiped off the map, when the year 2000 came.
Right.
So there was this weird sort of eeriness about that, and everybody kind of acted a little strange, and everyone, I'm not going to say was paranoid, but there was a sort of an extra inch or two when you were keeping someone at bay.
Right.
And once I bring that up and then someone rereads it, they're like, oh yeah, now I see what it was. Originally, it was just like, there's something weird about it, but they couldn't put their finger on it. And when I say I made a conscious effort to do this, then it's like, oh yeah, then it clicks. People who are younger obviously won't really understand that because they didn't fully experience it.
Right.
People that were really young, like, my nieces and my nephews, might not really understand it because they were kids. But people more our age would, because we're thinking about, we were in college or you were graduating college. It's something that kept stuck in your head. This idea of like, am I going to lose my emails? I'm going to lose my job. Like, I just graduated college. What, how's that going to affect things? And, so you kind of had this idea of like, my life is just starting.
Right.
Is it now going to be over?
Like, yeah, I'm not going to be on a plane on midnight. That's for sure.
Well, yeah, that was a big thing. That was a huge fear that people would say. Like, people thought there were going to be EMPs, and people thought like that everything was going to shut down. And it was this big thing of like, don't be on an airplane, be like locked in your room kind of thing. I remember my mom being really pissed at me for going to a New Year's Eve party at a friend of a friend. So it's not even somebody that she knew. It was, I'm going to so-and-so's house and then we're going to another party. And she was a little wary of it because she's like, well, what town are you going to be in? And, blah, 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 blah. And this and the next. And it's like, Mom, I'm 22 years old. I'll be fine. Yeah. But I mean, we didn't know why we needed to be worried, why we needed to be scared.
Yeah.
But there was this sort of like uneasiness. And when things are uneasy, people are either going to be super cautious or they're going to throw all caution to the wind.
Right. And so with that said, when you kind of sat down and you incubate, you're thinking about the storyline and putting it together, was the time like the year of that? Was that you said near the beginning, or was it near the end? Because you did say also that this was kind of like a 3-act thing originally, where you're going to have like World War II, then it was be the 1950s, and then this, and what was my question?
Was there a question really in there?
I guess like as like how specific was, as they said, like the backdrop of 1998 integral to this part of the story?
Originally, it wasn't, because originally we were going to start in World War II.
Right.
but once James and I really sat down, because as you'd heard on every other podcast I've said, I attacked the story from multiple angles, and I couldn't really find a clear path. And once we really sat down and James really started, digging through everything and finding, the crisp story, the thing that you could tell that everybody's going to know what's going on. It was okay. We're going to start in the 90s because those characters seemed to be a little more fleshed out. Their personalities were a little more fleshed out. Right. And so I figured, okay, well, that obviously is a starting point, because when you write a story, you start with either your characters, your plot, or your world. So that was a starting point. The world I mostly had because it's, real world. Right. So that was mostly sort of in there. The only thing I did was sort of fudge the area of New Jersey. Right. But aside from that, the world, gravity exists. You're not dealing with magic or anything too crazy like that. And then it comes down to what's the plot. And so I worked out more who these sisters were, their relationship to each other, their relationship each to their mom. And, that attitude that they had was very 90s. Right. This kind of devil may care, especially on Violet's side. But even, Poppy and Rose still have a little bit of that. Each sister is kind of the same, but one is dialed one direction, the other is dialed another. Right. Rose is pretty much, middle of the road. She can have her, Violet moments, and she can have her Poppy moments, but she's pretty middle of the road. Whereas Violet is like all the way, loose cannon, and Poppy is all the way, the one, huddled in the basement kind of thing, on New Year's Eve. Right. And but it's kind of like what you said earlier. It takes place in 98, but they are children of the 80s and the 70s, because that's when they grew up. So they have their references are going to be based off of, some of that. So it's interesting. It's the same thing like when you write about somebody living in their 80s right now. It may be 2021, but they're still their habits back in the 40s. They're back in the 40s. Yeah. So, yeah. And so with that said, because originally, as you said, this was supposed to be like you're kind of selling it to publishers as a 5-issue miniseries. Yeah, I mean, usually when it comes to pitching something, right. Publishers like sort of manageable bites. Yeah. And a 5-issue, 4 to 5 issues makes a nice trade paperback, is what it basically comes down to. So it was going to be a 5-issue miniseries, and the idea was you're going to touch on the other 2 planned arcs. And then, if something happens and we get the chance to return to these characters, then we can always sort of flesh out one of these other 2 arcs more, because, once the sisters are fleshed out and Jasmine is more fleshed out, you can then just add to it. You're not starting from whole cloth anymore. And even Grandma Dahlia has been somewhat fleshed out as well. So you're not starting from scratch. Mm. And so, if we have the opportunity to return to them, then great. If not, then what the plan is to just have a, 5-chapter, because we're doing an OGN as opposed to 5 individual issues, right. To just have a 5-chapter OGN, original graphic novel, that can stand alone. Right. So it shows that there's still past information, there's still past events that, the reader has not been completely exposed to, but what they have been exposed to has a clear beginning, a middle, and end. So, because as you said, this is like you work, full-time as a writer. So you have projects that are you're like paid to do. Like this is like, and then this is kind of like a passion, kind of like this is your kind of independent, kind of like this passion project you've been working on. How, I guess, from the writers that watch and listen to that, how do you either differentiate
firm energy put into it as compared to work you're hired to do, as compared to things that you are kind of like, this is my thing and I really want to get this? How do you split up the day? How do you split up the energy for that kind of stuff?
Well, it depends. I mean, everybody has their own way of splitting up, time. When I first went freelance full time as a writer, and I left the studio that I was working at, I reached out to another writer friend of mine, a writer named Eric Burnham, and Eric has been full time freelance for a very long time. And I asked him, I said, what should you do? What is considered a full day's work kind of thing? And obviously it's different for every person. And obviously you will have your whole day planned out, and then something will come up and, everything goes to hell.
Right.
But his advice to me was, whatever active projects you have. So if you're working on, say, 2 work for hire projects, make sure that you write 5 script pages on each project. And you're usually, full-time projects, you're usually juggling, anywhere from 2 to 4, depending on how busy you are. So that was the thing, and because those 5 pages can take you 3 hours, or it can take you 10 hours. Right. It really depends. But try to hit that goal. And there are days that I'll write way more than 5 pages, and there are days that I'll barely write 3. Right. But that was always the goal. And yes, there are work for hire projects that I'm doing, both with editing and with writing. But this still, I still keep a deadline for creator-owned projects, and a lot of my creator-owned projects were not self-published; they were published through through a publisher. 12 Devils Dancing was through Action Lab Danger Zone. Forgotten Home was through Comixology Originals. So I try to still keep a monthly schedule for it, not just for myself and for the routine, but also for the artist, because you want them to be able to count on a paycheck, is what it comes down to. When you're commissioned, for lack of a better term, to do a project, whether you're the writer, the artist, or whatever, basically what they are asking is, I'm asking you to be willing for money to block out X amount of months of your schedule. And obviously, sort of the freelancer's conundrum is feast or famine. So, when you're a freelancer, 90% of the time you say yes to everything, and then you want to strangle yourself later because, you're up to your eyeballs and stuff. But with an artist, 90% of the time they're working on one project. So I want to make sure that I keep up a good pace. So Carola Borelli, who is the line artist, and Gab Contreras, who's the colorist, they have consistent work coming.
Right.
Because when you're when you're pacing out a comic, you want to make sure that the writer is working on something, the artist is working on something, and the colorist is working on something, and the letterer is working. You don't want there to be a bottleneck. Right. And invariably there will, because emergencies come up and someone has to take a week off because someone's ill or whatever. That happens. I don't live in a fantasy world, but you try to plan it as best as you can so there wouldn't be a bottleneck. And so everybody isn't rushed, but they have like a nice, consistent flow to get through. So I've currently finished a decent draft of issue 4. I know that James has notes on it, so I'm going to have to go back. But the first chapter is absolutely complete. Colors, letters, everything. The second chapter has got all the line work done. Gab is finishing up the colors. All the lettering is already done. The third chapter, Carola's done all the layouts, is starting on the line work, and the script is completely done. Fourth chapter, pretty damn close. Fifth chapter, already hard outline.
Right.
So I'm working at a pace to make sure that they still have a steady flow of work. And then, then James will come back with some edits, and then, we go back, we make whatever revisions need to be made, and then keep going.
It's like you mentioned before, you mentioned earlier too, that, that you have, Carola
Borelli.
Yeah, Carilla Borelli, and Gab Contreras, but also your good friend James, who's helping you edit that. So my question is, did you, since you know that all of them, you've worked with them in the past, do you still say, like, listen, James, I know we know each other, I still need to have a contract? Or are you like, hey, handshake, we'll just get this going? How did that go about?
It depends. It depends on who I'm working with. This is actually the first time that I'm working with Carilla Borelli, the line artist.
All right.
I have worked with Gab before. James used to work at a publisher that I was in talks to work with, but that fell through. James also edited another project of mine that unfortunately we haven't finished, but maybe we'll get back to it. But I mean, in comics, there's a weird casualness to comics that I know can get kind of, because of this sort of like nebulous nature of it, things can kind of get weird. I make sure that, that I'm very plain with people. I'll say, okay, look, this is on your end as the, line artist, colorist, whatever, whatever role you play. This is a work for hire. I have a boilerplate contract. If you want one, I can fill it out, and I'll be happy to do that. For the most part, everybody's just like, okay, just write it down in an email. This is my page rate. These are, these are the deadlines that I hope to hit. I always try and pad a week to 10 days because, again, accidents happen. And of course, with COVID, people, God forbid someone got sick with COVID, right, or, a parent or a relative or somebody like that, that's obviously throwing things, into disarray. So I always make sure that things are kind of padded. And, I've been as transparent as possible with all the backers, and even in the sort of the risks and challenges on the Kickstarter page, I've said, God forbid something happens, we'll keep you guys abreast of the situation. But, we're looking, we're, knock wood, we're going at a good clip. Right. So if somebody wants to have it very formal, I'm more than happy to do that. If somebody's fine with being a little more casual, I'm more than happy with doing that, as long as you speak plain. Right. And that's basically what it is. I think this sort of back and forth of hemming and hawing about stuff, just say it straight up. This is the page rate. This is work for hire, or this is the page rate. We're going to split the IP, 50-50, 70-30, whatever your numbers. Just put it out there. Just be honest. It trust me, it will help in the long run.
Right. And as you mentioned earlier about this whole assembly line situation where it kind of starts with the writer. So you, as the kind of like the project creator, the kind of the project manager on this, you're at the beginning of the line, so you can get that pace going. Has there been any situations that you've worked with different teams where you, as the writer, still at the beginning of this air, how much stress or relief is it to not be the kind of like the head of the project on this and just be hired to write, as compared to having to manage the entire team?
Well, I mean, having been the editor on multiple projects, and I'm currently an editor at Mad Cave Studios, I mean, project management is part of the job. So right. Even if I'm not the editor on a project, or even if I'm not project manager on something, and it's still just, straight up work for hire, like, Daredevil or Mandrake, I still, worry about it, because I am, if nothing but punctual. If you tell me that this is my deadline and this is just my script deadline, I'm going to want to know what the delivery date is. And because I want to be able to help, because I have worked every aspect of a comic. So if the line artist is, you know, having trouble with something, or the colorist needs a page flatted and, you know, something like that, I'll volunteer to help because I want to make sure that we as a team look good,
Right.
and that we as a team hit our deadline. And so I'll say, okay, your flatter got ill. You need somebody to flat pages. I'll jump on the Dropbox or, you know, the Google Drive or whatever. I'll start grabbing pages. You know, you start at the beginning of the book, I'll start at the end of the book. We'll meet in the middle. You know, kind of thing. I want there to be, I want us all to look good.
Right.
So if that means that I have to wear an extra hat, I've worn them all.
Yeah.
I'll jump in if I have to.
Yeah.
So some project managers might be like, you know, pull back, you know, you're a little too eager. At the same time, I think others, I've dealt with others that are like, oh, Jesus Christ, thank God. You know, because making, you know, comics have a lot of moving parts. And if you're dealing with editor, penciler, inker, letterer, colorist, flatter, writer, you know, graphic designer, whatever. I mean, you're dealing with a lot of people, and we all know that the more people that you have to manage, the more opportunity there is for something to screw up, and then, you know, it all falls apart, and then everybody stands around, you know, pointing fingers. So
was that a conscious effort for a decision on your part to say, I'll do the lettering because you did not to have somebody else on the team, or is that just something because you love to letter?
It's a couple of things. One, I'm a control freak. I frankly, I'll admit that. Two, when I've worked with other letterers, they've been perfectly fine, competent, very good.
Right.
But whenever there needs to be a change, there's an extra step. Whereas, you know, if James, you know, who is a master of grammar and proper placement of commas, says, oh, there needs to be a comma here, instead of him telling me telling the letterer going back to the page, making the change, putting it back in the Dropbox, me grabbing it. Blah, blah, blah. No, just tell me, boom, done. That's it.
Yeah.
So I try to lessen the amount of people involved, simply because I think when you work on a smaller team, yes, control is going to sound as a disparaging word in this context, but it's easier to not only control the team and you know, sort of control the deadlines, but also to control the product.
Right.
So, I mean, we've got Kevin Wada, our fantastic cover artist. We've got Coral on the line art. We've got Gab on colors. Sheffel is doing the flats for Gab. James is doing edits. I'm throwing down the letters and then putting the book together and doing all sort of the production work and stuff like that, as well as Elaine Grace doing the fabulous, you know, print that we also have on the Kickstarter. But it's a lot easier to sort of, you know, keep track of everybody. It's like, how many fingers do I have? How many people do I have? You know, kind of thing. It's a lot easier to keep track of everybody when there are fewer people. And like I said, I mean, I've worn all the hats. If I need to jump in and do something else, it's part of the job, you know?
Right. Yeah. And do you see, so I'm curious about, for the lettering, is that something that you use through like Photoshop, or
No, you don't letter in Photoshop.
Okay.
There are a couple of things, and this is where people are gonna think I'm stuck up, but we're being real here. There are a couple of things that I can spot right off the bat. You know, amateur lettering. One, if somebody works in Photoshop. Two, if somebody does something called football balloons, where you just sort of make a circle and then just squash it, and it looks kind of like a football or rugby. That's another sort of amateur mistake. I consistently tell people, hire a letterer, hire an actual, real, competent letterer, not somebody who just says, oh yeah, I can do Photoshop, because you don't letter in Photoshop, you letter in Illustrator.
Okay.
So if somebody says, oh, I lettered in Photoshop, already. Now, I know a lot of people who letter in Photoshop because they do webcomics. That's great. Do you ever plan on printing those webcomics? Because if you do, you might want to letter in Illustrator.
The vector, because it's like vector based is the
Vector
illustrator.
versus a raster base. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. That's good to know. I had, because even if you do 300 DPI on your Photoshop, it's still not going to matter.
Most printers, 300 DPI is the absolute minimum.
Right.
Absolute minimum. I don't go below 400 or 450, depending. Some publishers even want 600. A lot of publishers want line art in 600. They want some want color in 600. Some want colors at 450. But also 600. Yeah, you don't. No, you don't letter in Photoshop. Please don't. And like I said, I'm going to sound stuck up, and I know a lot of people are on a budget, and I get that. But you can find a competent letterer for relatively inexpensive, as long as they don't have to do all the production work. As if you look online, take a course if you want to do it yourself. There's the Kubert School has an online lettering course. I used to teach an online lettering course at Comics Experience. So I mean, you can find, if you want to do it yourself, take a course. There's a million and one Nate. I don't know if you pronounce his name Picos or Picos from Blambot. He does a bunch of tutorials on YouTube. Go watch the tutorials. But if you letter your own stuff, bad lettering really can sink a book. And I'm, like I said, I'll own it being stuck up with that. But if I'm reading a book and the lettering is bad, I'm more likely to just kind of put it to the side.
Right. Yeah. It's it's like bad CGI in a film. You're like, yeah, it's just not the same.
It's one of these things where with lettering, if it's bad, it's noticeable. If it's good, you don't notice it.
Right.
You don't want your lettering to really stand out unless you're doing this like, big sort of splash page, big, crack-a-thoom, explosion kind of thing. You don't want your lettering to stand out, especially just dialogue, just the regular flow of dialogue. You don't want people to go, oh, that kind of looks weird, or I don't know where my eye is supposed to go.
Right.
You don't want that. So
following it in like the Z pattern as you're reading the.
Yeah. Well, I always say like the backwards S, because you sort of like loop around. Yeah. But I mean, that's exactly what it is. And, a good letterer, I've seen stories lately that the artist, I don't think the artist has done a lot of sequential artwork, because the flow of the panels really is very sort of all over the place. So a good letterer is going to, help in that, is going to basically tell the reader, your eye is going to go from here to here to here to here, and that's important. That's definitely important. And because you don't want to read something, you don't want to work when you're reading. You want to be able to enjoy it, and you want it to be effortless, and you want to just be able to engage in the story, in the artwork, in the characters and everything. You don't want to have to sit there and go, oh, did I read that? You don't want to do that, because that takes you out.
Right.
You want to be immersed and stay there until you flip that last page.
Right. There was, like, for instance, like making sure that you're very clear that if it's like a 2-pager, that it reads as a 2-pager instead of
as a spread.
Yeah. And so my next question for you is that, because you say you also wear the hat of an editor, so is it your advice that even though that if somebody is an editor and a writer, do one or the other on a project, not both?
I think everybody needs a separate editor.
Okay.
I do. Because as creators, when you're in the creator role, you're very myopic, and you are simply focused on the story that you want to tell, and the story that's been percolating in your head for however long. Yeah. That because everything makes sense to you, and all the pieces connect in your head, you need that objective person to come in and say, yeah, they might connect in your head because you've been living it with it for 3 years, right. But to the outside person, it doesn't connect. We need to build a bridge here, where there needs to be some tendon that gets us from A to B.
Right.
So I think that everybody needs an editor, even if you work as an editor. One thing that I always say is I edit books I would never want to write. No, but I do that because I don't want to I don't want to overstep my bounds with the writer.
Right.
Um, I will edit a book that I have no desire to write and just simply help the writer get to where they need to go. You know, when I edit a book, I'll say to the writer, okay, what's our goal? Okay. Like, what is the story you want to tell? And then I'm basically the bumpers. Like when you were a little kid and you played bowling and had the bumpers.
Yeah.
I'm basically the bumpers. My job is to keep you on that path. And if your initial story idea is all over the place, my job is to help you find a path. And then once we have a nice clear path, my job is to keep you there.
Right.
And I mean, and James will attest to this. An editor is part, writer, part grammarist, part therapist. You get, and I've written these emails, nothing's working, my brain isn't working, or I've received those emails, my brain isn't working. And it's your job to basically say, all right, take a step back, take a deep breath. Let's figure this out.
Right.
Let's break down the situation. And then try and work through it. So I, help you find a path. And then once the path is found, keep you on it.
Mm. So like basically your advice too is like for every writer needs a James in their life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and there are different types of editors. There are editors that are story editors. They're the ones that are going to help you find the path. There are editors that are more or less just proofreaders. So they're going to let you have as much rope as you want to hang you with, but your commas are going to be in the right place.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer somebody who's like James, who can see the path. I mean, James is a fine artist himself. James has worked in sequential art as well. James has worked in comics for many years, and he's seen it from both the creator side and the editorial side. So he has a lot of experience, bringing to the table. And so getting an editor like James, I think, is important. If you only have a story editor, then that's fine too. But I would then have a proofreader. So because a proofreader sort of copy editor, their job is basically to look, that's not a complete sentence, or use a comma here, or you missed a word, or blah, 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 whatever. So if you don't have a James, then get yourself a story editor and then a proofreader.
Right. Yeah.
But if you have a James, then, then you're golden.
You're golden.
And you're golden.
So let's chat a bit about your.
I'm gonna turn my light on just because it's getting a little dark in here.
Yeah. East Coast. Yeah, we're both in the East Coast. So yeah.
There we
There
go.
you go. All right. So let's chat a bit about 80% funded. Wow. Okay. See. All right. Getting there. So
moving right along.
Moving right along. So let's chat about your tiers. So for people that are listening and watching and are interested in being a part of this, do you want us to kind of go through a bit of some of the tier levels you have on here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we have we'll do the infomercial. We have a tier for all of your budgets. We've got the $1 tier, which is simply a thank you. That will be not only in the digital version, but also printed in the book. Then we have the $15 tier, which is for a DRM-free digital copy of the book, as well as your name printed in the book. Then we've got, we had an early bird special, which is a print copy of the book. And then you would get, the thank you, but also the digital copy. We had 42 early bird specials where you would also get a pin.
Oh, wow. Okay. That was the early bird. Okay.
Yes. So that went already. Right. And then we still have, ready for the field is what it's called. And that's the physical copy of the book. Yeah. Plus, your digital copy and your thank you. We've got some other digital rewards, some other #1 books that I've written, like M3. We've got temporary tattoo, because the character of Violet has a floral tattoo on her arm of a purple violet, a red poppy, and a yellow rose.
Right.
So we've got like a temporary tattoo for that. We've got Fabulous Print by Elaine Grace. We've got Grab Bag, which this was an idea I kind of stole from Jimmy Palmiotti a couple of years ago. I had seen him doing a Kickstarter where it was sort of like a blind bag, and we did it for Strange Tales as well. This idea of like, okay, so you're gonna get another #1, that another comic that I've done. So
Right.
it could be Mandrake, it could be Charmed, it could be Xena or whatever. And that'll be part of sort of the blind box.
Okay.
We also have, when we have the print, we also have we have these fabulous journals that would be made by a company called Danique, which they print custom journals. This is the latest one I literally just started yesterday. It's got the cover from Forgotten Home #7 that was drawn by Natasha Alterici, and it's the homage to Daredevil 181 by Frank Miller.
Oh, wow.
So we're going to have custom journals made with the fabulous Kevin Wada cover. We also have a retailer tier for where, you know, your store will get a thank you and you'll get multiple copies, obviously, so you can sell them. And we've got the tier that we had to get drawn in the book. We only had 3 of those because, you know, you don't want, you know, poor Corolla to have to sit there and draw, you know, 900 likenesses. That went quick. And then we also had, the last tier was pretty much, you get a bit of everything, and I'm going to do a script review. And you said you'd done that one, and I'm warning you that I am fair.
Right.
I am truthful, but I am fair.
That's good.
So I can be harsh, but I am definitely very fair. And I'm not one of those people that will just say it sucks. I will give you a reason why it sucks if it sucks. And not only that, but I'll tell you how to make it better.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's good. And so I want to ask, so I'm intrigued because you have, this isn't your sole IP, like your own creation, because you also, as you said, M3 was also your
M3 is my co-created story with Vicente Alcazar. Forgotten Home. Right. 12 Devils I had a copy of 12 Devils here somewhere. 12 Devils Dancing, Strange Tales, and is co-created IP with Claire Connolly. So yeah, I mean, I've done a good amount of creator-owned work as well. I mean, if somebody wants to make an animated story about Claire and the story that Claire and I did about Winston Churchill, or, you know, Cheese, a love story, or Eve the Immortal Lobster, we will happily have a conversation about that. So
do you have any, I'm just curious, do you put in like a little Easter eggs for people that are fans and readers of your other work, like anything from Forgotten Home or M3 that maybe in the background, or maybe a side reference of something on the radio in the background, or
Forgotten Home has, I think, the most Easter eggs.
Okay.
There is a scene in the first 5 or 6 pages where they're in this young boy's room, and he's got posters and stuff all over the walls. And on the walls, there is an M3 poster. There is a poster of the character of Aisha from 12 Devils Dancing. There is a poster of Gardner, which is the colorist Matt Emmons' character. So there's a Gardner poster, and then there's also another piece, Marika Cresta, who's the line artist. There's a character that she created as a poster, and then in another character's bedroom, there is a poster of the character of Callum from 12 Devils Dancing, and then another poster of Ray Anthony Height, who's a fantastic artist and creator. Ray, I inked some of Ray's work, you know, a million years ago on Midnight Tiger. So there's the character of Gavin from Midnight Tiger also on this young woman's wall.
Okay. And so have you ever thought of like some sort of like, say for instance, like the Erica Schultz verse? Is it like a shared universe at all? Is there
No,
any, no,
no.
it's
I
all
mean,
separate?
it's not a shared universe. M3, 12 Devils Dancing, uh, and yeah, I would say M3, 12 Devils Dancing, and the Deadliest Bouquet can live in the same universe because they're all real world stuff.
Right.
Forgotten Home lives in a completely different universe. Cheese and Churchill are their own universes, as is Eve the Immortal Lobster,
Right.
which is literally a story about space lobsters. So I mean, there's not like one. It's not like crossover from Donny Cates in Image. Like there's pretty much everybody has their own universe, and I think I have to think of it as each individual project,
Right. Okay.
because I don't want past work to start influencing. You know, like
Right.
if I put if Callum Cooper, who's the FBI agent in 12 Devils Dancing, was the character who was chasing down M3, it would have been a completely different story.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So when I wrote M3, I was singularly focused on that story.
Right.
And then, writing 12 Devils, yes, there's still an FBI agent in that, Callum Cooper, but I wanted to make sure that the story focused on something completely different, because the stories are different. One story, I mean, they're both technically redemption stories,
Right.
but one focuses on redemption from something that you did as a child versus redemption from something that you did as an adult.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. Have you ever had, like, after the fact, after a project's over, have you ever had like a artist come in and say, I don't know if you noticed, but I kind of added in my own Easter egg for something of a previous project I did? Or would that?
I would be fine with that. I
Oh yeah.
mean, what a lot of times happens is artists will, like, instead of drawing a bunch of stuff for background, like I have a lot of art on my walls in the background. It's
Right.
if an artist was drawing this, those would just be blank frames.
Right.
And if the colorist had, I would usually just tell the colorist to just put a tone or something in it. But if we have that opportunity, then yeah, then I said to Marika and Matt, especially in the idea of Forgotten Home, I said, look, we have these empty frames. This is a kid's bedroom. Let's put some posters up. Give me some stuff. And I didn't want to put up posters of Spider-Man or anything like that. I don't want to get sued by anybody.
Right.
So, I own IP. They have their own stuff. Let's do it.
Right.
And so I will happily, showcase some stuff. I mean, I reached out to Ray Anthony, and I said, like, hey, I've got this blank poster in a 14-year-old girl's bedroom. Do you mind if I throw Gavin up there?
Yeah.
Midnight Tiger. Fantastic. I mean, I would always ask the
Right.
permission of the person, obviously. I mean,
Right.
I'm not just going to sort of blindside them, because even if it's like a flattering thing, at the same time, maybe the subject matter of the character or the subject matter of the book is not something they would endorse.
Right.
So you don't want to have them, be in that weird position of like, yeah, you're my friend, but I don't want to endorse like a horror book with nudity or something. Like 12
Right.
Devils is a horror book, and there is nudity in it. And I always mention to people, yes, there's nudity in this, and that's a body horror and things like that. So you wouldn't want to be like, hey, by the way, I put your YA story in a poster, and there's a dead body next to it. Like you don't want to do that. So I would always ask permission. Liana Kangas is another person who I said, hey, do you have any like cool, like just graphic art or something I could like throw up on somebody's wall kind of thing.
Yeah.
But a lot of it just comes down to like, you want to make sure that they're okay with their stuff being in that environment, but also being part of the theme of the book. So if it's
Right.
something that they're like not really into, then don't make things weird. Like don't put your friends in an awkward position.
Right.
So always ask first, I would say.
Cool. Well, this is great. So thank you very much, Erica. And so where can people find you? Would be Erica Schultz Writes. Is that the best?
Erica Schultz Writes, WRITES, is my
Okay.
website. Erica Schultz 42 is my handle on Twitter, and Erica Schultz Writes is my handle on Instagram.
Okay.
I'm mostly on Twitter. I'm sort of on Instagram. I've been trying to be better on Instagram. And if you want to follow the Deadliest Bouquet, the Twitter for it is deadly_bouquet. And on Instagram, it's the Deadliest Bouquet comic. And as you can see, my website, Writer of Stuff, Creators of Things, I've got a thanks page from our Strange Tales. I also have a shop where you can go and you can pick up any of my previous work. So
Oh, cool.
Xena, Charmed, M3, Forgotten Home, Revenge, Daredevil, you know, whatever I still have in stock in the closet in the corner, you know, kind of thing. 12 Devils Dancing, got that too. So yeah, and there's links for both digital Comixology as well as you know, send me an email and I will, you know, send me an email, send me money, I will sign and mail you a book.
Right.
So
Perfect. Yeah, and so really excited for the Deadliest Bouquet. Thank you so much, Erica.
And thank you for backing it.
Yeah, and it's been a genuine pleasure chatting.
I look forward to tearing apart your script.
Yeah. I'm not as fancy as some of the other ones where they already have everything pre-plugged in. So I do a lot of stuff off of it.
Don't get podcast envy. It's okay. I've been on all kinds of podcasts, from the good ones to the shit ones to whatever. I've been on them all.
Well, I think this will be a happy medium, right in between. So
we'll see.
I
mean, the one good thing about being on so many podcasts right now is that I have a really, like, the production value. I've been exposed to, like, the infomercial, to the in your mom's basement, literally, to the, like, super fancy Alex Ross, you know, kind of thing, animation, and all of that, you know. So I've seen it all.
Mm-hmm. Good.